Mr. President, this is now the 17th time I've come to the Senate chamber specifically to speak against President Biden's vaccine mandate. I've pledged before, and I pledge again today, to continue this fight until we beat the mandate. Now, thankfully, progress has been made on this front. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit last week halted enforcement of President Biden's general mandate. They did so directing their ruling specifically to the OSHA portion of the mandate. This is the one that applies to all workers everywhere in any place of employment with more than 100 workers. I, along with millions of Americans, am grateful that the U.S. court system performed its role in protecting the separation of powers and otherwise protecting the limits on government written into our laws and our Constitution. It's also encouraging to see the government agency charged with enforcing the general mandate, that is OSHA, has now halted the enforcement of the mandate and is complying with the order issued by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. This, however, does not end President Biden's vaccine mandates. That mandate in particular remains the subject of ongoing litigation. And there are other requirements placed on other specific groups of workers outside of the OSHA mandate and therefore outside the scope of the order issued by the Fifth Circuit. Now, I've spoken previously on the situation that members of our armed forces face and on things that people who work in the healthcare profession face. Difficult things, challenging things, things that threaten their livelihoods and cause a lot of problems for workers. I've offered various bills to help those groups of Americans keep their jobs and make sure that they have the right to make their own medical decisions. I'm fighting against the mandate. I'm not fighting against the vaccines. I support the vaccines. I'm vaccinated. I've encouraged others to be vaccinated. I see the development of these vaccines as something of a modern medical miracle, one that's protecting so many millions of Americans from the harms of COVID. But this one-size-fits-all dictate from Washington certainly isn't the answer, and under our system of government can't be. I've heard from hundreds of Utahns who are personally at risk of losing their jobs and their livelihoods due to this mandate. Many of these Utahns have religious or health concerns about the vaccine. President Biden promised these mandates would include exemptions for those people in those categories specifically. But in reality, they're being dismissed or placed on unpaid leave or pushed into retirement with reduced benefits. These are good people, everyday people. Many are dedicated frontline workers. Far too many are just trying to make ends meet and feed their families. It shouldn't be too much to ask to allow them to continue doing that unencumbered by their own government in their efforts to do that. These mandates will just push people out of work and make many of them not only unemployed, but unemployable outcasts in their chosen professions, professions that they've spent years studying and learning, receiving certifications, just in order to work. What a tragedy. This wouldn't just harm those affected directly by the mandates. It absolutely would harm those directly affected by them, but the harm extends much further than those directly affected. It would affect all of us, in fact. The American economy is currently facing a labor shortage, the likes of which we haven't seen in decades. Businesses across the country are struggling to find enough workers just to keep their doors open, let alone produce and serve at full efficiency. President Biden's mandate will add to our high unemployment and our low labor force participation rates. And it'll put even more pressure on inflation that's making it harder for Americans everywhere, especially poor and middle-class Americans, people living paycheck to paycheck, who find that every dollar they earn is buying less of everything from gas to groceries, from housing to health care. Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell recently warned, quote, hiring difficulties and other constraints could continue to limit how quickly supply can adjust, raising the possibility that inflation could turn out to be higher and more persistent than we expect, close quote. The mandate is only worsening the problem. Now, I believe the Biden administration recognizes the harms this mandate will cause for our workforce. It's evident in the administration's date of compliance extension to January 4th that this is the case. Now, I have to ask an obvious question here, or one that I think should be obvious, should be intuitive. If the forced vaccination of our entire federal workforce, including employees and contractors and subcontractors, if forcing the vaccination of every one of these workers were truly an emergency so drastic that all workers, contractors, and subcontractors, even those working remotely in their own homes, must be vaccinated immediately, then why would they risk delaying compliance? They can't have it both ways. If they want to say this is an emergency, this is dire, so dire that we've got to force every contractor, subcontractor, and federal employee to get vaccinated immediately, and we've got to fire them if they don't. If that is truly so emergent, then why delay it to January 4th? Why delay it at all? Now, to be sure, it would be bad, and to be sure, I'm glad they've extended it. Perhaps, maybe this means they're reconsidering this awful, horrible step, this horrible thing that they're inflicting on those who can least afford to absorb something like this. But it really does undercut the emergent nature of the situation. It undercuts their underlying reasoning that this has to happen immediately. So immediately that we got to fire all of them if they won't submit to presidential medical orthodoxy. This mandate is even so drastic that it includes all workers and all contractors, including all those who work remotely, don't even go into a workplace. And it also includes even those who have natural immunity from a previous case of COVID-19, something that some studies have indicated will provide 27 times the immunity of a vaccine. Again, the vaccines are great. I've been vaccinated. I've encouraged others to do the same. The vaccines are protecting hundreds of millions of Americans right now. But why not take into account their natural immunity? And why on earth would you fire someone who already has natural immunity or who works from home? That makes absolutely no sense. This mandate simply goes far beyond what's reasonable. And it begs all sorts of questions. Why are you doing this? So today, I'm offering a bill to help another group, yet another group of people. It's a group consisting of people not protected by the Fifth Circuit's halting of the general vaccine mandate. Federal workers are still facing a vaccine requirement from the Biden administration. Almost 3 million workers in this country are employed by the federal government. Many of them have reached out to me and my office who are concerned about losing their jobs due to this mandate. I know I'm not the only one. I know that every single member of this body has received phone calls, letters, emails, and other pleas for help from people who don't want to lose their jobs. This is a response to them. This is an effort to try to help them. And part of my ongoing effort to reemphasize the fact that it doesn't have to be this way. My bill, the Protecting Our Federal Workers, Protecting Our Federal Workforce from Forced COVID-19 Vaccination Act, would prohibit an executive agency from requiring its employees to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. It's a simple solution to prevent more unemployment and to protect countless Americans from being forced out of the workforce. This bill will help protect Americans' right to make their own medical decisions and will help protect our economy as it strains under multiple crises and as the holiday season comes around. I encourage and sincerely implore all of my colleagues to support it. To that end, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S. 3243, which is at the desk. I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.